All right, thank you everyone for joining us for the first product movie club, which
Thank you for
is
setting it up.
yeah, no problem. Which is basically an extension of the product book club that Jeremy had been running, but that due to other commitments and just the time it takes to pull that together and read an entire book, have not continued to pursue. But I thought I have had good success at a previous company we would do these synchronously where we'd watch the video together and then talk about it after. But I think here at GitLab, we can share it out in advance, watch it on our own, and then come together to chat more about how it might apply to us here, what we agree with, what we don't agree with. And the main goal of all this is just to help us become better product people at the end of the day. So the first video that we chose for this session was one that I picked because it's pretty short. It's not too complicated, doesn't get into the weeds too much, and I think it's a thing that probably is especially challenging for us here at GitLab, which really is stakeholder relationship building, management, and getting them involved early and often in projects, so that the path to getting it out and having it be a success is smoother, and you have less interruption, disruption, second guessing, etc. that can come with not including your stakeholders in some of these steps. So with that, I'd like to just kind of get into, I put some questions in the agenda doc if folks want to open that up to help kind of just drive a discussion around this. And I filled in some things in ahead so it wasn't just completely empty. I tried to cover the main aspects of the talk, but I'm sure I missed some. And also kind of, what do we relate to? What do we agree with? But we don't have to follow this exactly. Like, let's just have it be an organic conversation about it. So with that, why don't I just I'll start with the first question and we can see where the talk leads us. But does someone want to, just put out what they could relate to? Actually, I'll say mine. I think the shared knowledge aspect is critical. I really felt the reducing decision speed that really resonated, because I think that's something that at least I've experienced here, where projects get started, but then stakeholders get pulled in at a certain point. They have questions and it kind of stalls out and then restarts. And I've had this a few times on some of these larger projects. And I thought that was one that really hit home. It's just like, oh yeah, we need to get a shared understanding across the engineering team, the UX team, the product team, but also all the stakeholders, because they're the ones that at the end of the day are going to slow things down potentially. Were there other things that resonated with you all?
I think there's something around, the hippo, or the highest paid opinion, resonated well with me, but I think it's a balancing act. I agreed with your point, Mike, lower in the doc, of you can't necessarily include everybody in everything in terms of the whole process, but I think we can do a better job of how do we make sure that people feel included and have the knowledge from things like customer interviews. Can we be pulling in more transcripts from Dovetail, and build more of a story around how we got to the solutions that we're proposing, so that it doesn't get the plan doesn't change at the last minute.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think, for better or for worse, the hippo factor can be high here, and I think that is it may just be the size of our company. There's a lot of product teams, and there's only so many hippos.
Yeah.
And so it's harder for them, I think, to build that shared understanding, to be involved at an intimate level with all of these projects that are happening. So it's kind of, how can we balance that? We've got what 20 plus product teams. I don't even know the exact number. How can we balance that where each of those teams is able to get that information surfaced and responded to by the stakeholders in a super efficient way? Because otherwise it won't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Kevin, Amanda, do either of you have anything?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to view the video, so I'm just here to participate and learn from y'all.
Cool.
I think you might have recommended this to me, Mike, because I thought I was in Kevin's position, because I did not know that we were supposed to pre-watch, and I came to the thing, and I've definitely watched this. It was just a couple months back, so I'm just trying to remember the details.
Yeah, some of the
So,
main
yeah, no,
aspects are I kind of have them at the top. It really is about, she's very big on getting them into the room, getting, them involved in all those aspects. That's just not going to really scale for us here. But a lot of it just goes down to kind of summarizing, getting them in early so that they are kind of involved in research as much as possible so that they, there's that shared understanding essentially that they have seen the same information you have to make the decisions that you've made so that they're likely to just, agree with it. There is the, she kind of gets into the various activities you can pull them into. Getting them all together at the same time, I think, is an important aspect because I've felt this at times where we're kind of like just the middle person between various stakeholders, and we're kind of playing the game of telephone where it's like, oh, well, talk to so-and-so and they said this and let's just get them all together and have them talk about it as a group, because then they can hear each other's opinions, they can bounce, and you're more of a moderator or a mediator at that point than just a communication kind of go-between. And so it's more efficient for the product person, it's more efficient for the stakeholders in the project in general, and there's additional benefit beyond that that's just them hearing each other out and seeing each other's points of view. So that's a big one, and to do that is the critical aspect at the end is kind of, you need to make sure that they know that you value their time. So in order to do that, you've got to be organized, you got to have the agenda. So a lot of things we do at GitLab already that aren't as common in other orgs are like, have the agenda ready in advance, share out information, be on time, like take good notes, all those things. And we do, I think, here a very good job at that as it is, but those are important aspects so that the stakeholder knows the time investment is respected and it's going to be worth it.
Like, one of the things that I remember now that stood out to me, because at the time I had a different opinion, and that is a stakeholder saying no to your idea is actually better than a silent stakeholder, because at least that means they're engaged. Whereas like in the past, I thought, well, a silent stakeholder is just thinking about it, maybe more reserved. If they had objections, surely they would say so. But actually, pushing for engagement is so important, even when the answer's no, so that you could at least suss out like, well, why is it no? And you can adapt from there. But just that silent stakeholder could be the thing that derails the project. And I've personally, seen that here as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think at some point in the video it even says like, silence is not agreement.
Yep.
And I think that's, I know I've made that mistake here. It's like I've mentioned people on issues, they never responded. I try again, they didn't respond. So I'm like, all right, well, we're good to go. And I think you have to be more proactive. You've got to go that extra mile to make sure. Otherwise, it's going to come back to bite you. I had this earlier in my career. I had an SVP that told me like, sometimes you've got to go the 51%. Like just doing the ask and then wait is not enough. You've got to go that extra bit to make sure that they've heard it. You've got some kind of agreement or disagreement, but you've had that moment, because the silence and the assumption of, yeah, everything's good here is what can come back to really to get you in the end.
Curious to hear your own thoughts on how do you, in the event you want to make a decision, getting an explicit yes or no, as pointed out in the conversation, can take quite some time. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I've tried here is basically getting more and more, I don't know the right term, not aggressive, but more and more in your face, I guess, in terms. So like start with the friendly @ mention on an issue, and then maybe give that a day or two, follow up again if you don't hear anything. Then maybe it's a Slack DM or mention in a channel. And then it may be that you ultimately just need to schedule a meeting to talk to them. It's kind of this progression of intensity in the outreach, I would say. That's how I do it.
Yeah. And go ahead, Amanda.
No, it's okay.
I was just going to add to that personally, I followed a similar structure, but I also put a short due date on the issue. just to increase the priority and the kind of alerts that I get personally by it, so that I'm reminded to get the follow-up, to get people's commitment, so it just doesn't fall into my backlog.
And Sam, that's a
Yeah.
due date on a GitLab issue, or is that like,
Yeah.
hey, I need your response by Friday?
Honestly, either. But usually I do get the GitLab due date so that the automated reminders go out, which is also, helps me stay on top of it. And then following up with the people individually as needed.
I try both tactics where together, specifically, I put it on the issue, but in the narrative to the people who have to sign off, I will say, I'm looking for blah, 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 and here's why. And I'm time boxing this and closing out, for ultimate decision on this date. So when they see it in their email and maybe they don't follow the link right away, they see, oh, I have 4 days to do this, so maybe I'm going to deprioritize this, or I need this by this afternoon, and so I prioritize it. But another angle I wanted to bring up to your question, Kevin, is I've been in a situation here at GitLab where something I was pursuing needed e-group approval, and I went to the e-group for it and got approval, usually because we had an async or a synchronous meeting or something like that. But down the line, during the implementation process, or the development process rather, we started to get dissent from a few layers down, from the direct layer to e-group and below that. And what I've learned, and that derailed us. Even though the e-group said yes, it rightfully so, we didn't get all opinions. And so a new tactic that I'm trying is where something like this is critical, and I need to make sure that we have like a few layers beneath e-group on board before I go to e-group. I'm trying to create little targeted conversations with those folks, sometimes spinning up a synchronous meeting to just get 3 people in a room and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? Okay, that group is good. And then maybe the next group and so forth. Or if I could do it asynchronously, that's better. And then once I have all of their approval, when I go to the e-group, I could say, okay, these folks have already signed off. So it becomes a no-brainer for the e-group to sign off, and I don't have those unexpected roadblocks further in the dev cycle.
That's great, man. Yeah, that's a
Thanks for sharing.
Very smart approach. And it's actually not exactly related, but similar approach when you're trying to do like any kind of influencing of a large group. It's great to let's say you want to influence something with the entire e-group, maybe meet with them one-on-one individually to get each of their buy-in, and then bring everyone together. So they've already kind of bought into it one-on-one with you, but that's to drive to the unified decision. It's I had influence training years back, and that was one of the main points is he's kind of like a lawyer. You don't want to ask the question that you don't know the answer to. You don't want to come to those kinds of big decision meetings without knowing, like you've already pretty much got it in the bag, and this is a formality.
And even in those one-on-one influence decisions, if it turns out that person's not on board, at least you get out what the objections are. You have time to work those, maybe re-meet, or when you make your ultimate presentation, you can speak to those objections. So yeah, I think that's super smart.
Let's see. Was there anything you didn't agree with in the video? I mean, we covered a couple that, I don't think collaboration has to be synchronous / in person. Although at times I think it is easier that way. And I'm not sure here, especially stakeholders can realistically be included in all aspects of, research and everything. But were there other things that kind of, you just like, I don't know about that. That doesn't really, I'm not sure I'm buying it. I see head shaking.
The big one for me, Mike, was the one that you've already hit on, that, we realistically, we can't ask stakeholders to be included all the way down to research. I think the big thing that I took away from it is trying to think outside the box of how can we do a better job of telling the story of the decision that we came to through all of the different resources and research, qualitative and quantitative, that we did. And what is a better way for us to display that? And ideally in an asynchronous manner. And since we don't generally use decks, and my mind is going to, like, is there a more formalized structure that we could do in our issue format, similar to how the opportunity canvas is set up to set the stage for buy-in for a new large idea, is there a way for us to fill out a similar grid format, smaller, in our issue descriptions or something similar, so it's easy to see how a story or a decision came to be and the factors that went into it?
I think that's a great idea. And to add kind of things considered as well, because the first thing a stakeholder wants to do when they see a solution is, well, why aren't you doing it this way? Or I think you should do it this way. But to see that that was part of the consideration process and here's why it was not validated. I think that's a really good async tactic.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And that flows perfectly into the next kind of section here is, how are we or might we apply some of these concepts at GitLab? I think that's a great one, Sam. Are there other things that we think we can do? I mean, one of the things for me that, again, at a previous company, we had pretty good success with was project kickoffs, which was basically, it would be a synchronous meeting, but I think to your point, Sam, this was where the team would put everything into a deck, present it, like, here's the research we've done, here are the problems we found, the use cases, here's what we want to, here's the kind of the vision of the project, and here's the different, releases or iterations as we get towards that vision. And it gets alignment between everyone ideally, and then they can raise concerns before you start developing, like, wait, I'm not sure about that, or I didn't catch that. And that's one technique that was in the video, but also I've had success with. I think we could do it here. I've done it here a couple of times, generally more for working groups. But I think, if there's that issue format, I think that could work really well. And maybe if there's a lot of questions and discussion on that issue, that's when things can be brought into a synchronous combo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think starting with the issue for both small and large is just good practice because it can help us frame our thoughts and frame the conversation. And some you're just going to naturally, even if there aren't a lot of questions, you're going to kick off a working group or a presentation layer just because of the gravity of the type of change. But at least you're training people to read that issue and you're training yourself to go through that process. Yeah, I think that's really valuable, especially on some bigger projects where there's assumptions that everybody's on the same page. I've fallen into that trap where I was asked to do a particular thing. So I thought that's what everybody wanted. And I just ran with it. And I didn't necessarily inform other stakeholders about it because I thought they were part of the initial ask and they weren't. And so they were surprised. So never taking for granted who knows about what and just making sure you're disseminating the information to all stakeholders is really important.
Yeah, I think to that, Amanda, I think over communication is always, it's better to err on over communication than under communication. And even on the buy-in piece, I have a story I'll share here where we were looking to allow GitLab.com customers to pay for users as they're added instead of them adding them and then chewing up. I had this written up in an issue. I had put this into the CEO channel and asked for approval and got it. But I don't think, looking back, I knew it was potentially a controversial change, and I didn't spell that out and make that super clear. Like, and Sid's super busy. He's got a ton of things and a ton of requests coming in. So even if it could create a more difficult conversation or a denial of your approach, make it super clear. Like, these are the things you are likely to care about, stakeholder. This is how it could affect you in a positive or negative way. Let's talk about it. Instead of, here's the issue, do you approve? And I hope you don't read the details too much because I don't know if you're going to approve it or not. Like, there was a big mistake on my part, and it was a learning as well. Anything else in terms of how we could, at GitLab, and with the constraints with how we work, get stakeholders more involved earlier, with the ultimate, the end goal being a smooth launch and deploy plan? Okay, maybe transition. I had kind of this question, what's our version of get them in the room, but I think it's get them on the Zoom. It's like, kind of is what it is. I don't know if it's worth getting into too much. One thing I'd love to understand though is, in today's world, like, what are you doing here? What's helping? You know, what have you found successful? I think we touched on a couple of these things, but you know, are there creative ways that you have found to get stakeholders involved and engaged, or just informed, that may be beneficial for others to learn and understand?
One thing I struggle with asynchronous communication is the volume of things to read. And we all have this problem. So understanding like when I'm merely being informed, when there's something for me to reference, or something is important, I need to really pay attention. That helps tremendously for me as a reader, digesting all this information. So I try to do the same when I am tagging anybody else on a particular issue, to make it explicit. Hey, I'm just letting you know, or hey, I really need you to think deeply on this issue. Help me out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think we all struggle. I struggle with it for sure. And sometimes I'll skip over an issue in my email because I don't think it, but if I'm explicitly called out, or, hey, Mike, we need your opinion here, anything like that is going to make it more likely for me that I'll respond. So I think that's a great tactic for when we're trying to make sure stakeholders are absorbing something or weighing in.
Yeah, I try to solve that problem through my own behavior. So I try to definitely always @mention somebody. It's so easy to just reply to something and forget to @mention the person, so the notification changes. But like if I have something low priority, I'll indicate, you know, low priority in all caps after I @mention the person, and then write whatever the thing is, so that when they get the notification in their email, they could just kind of skip that one and read it later. Or I also like to make tasks within issues where I have like specific deliverables and kind of assign who I'm talking to each of those things. So I just find through the behavior you want to receive, kind of putting it out there. Maybe some folks will see what you're doing and say, oh, that's a good tactic. That made me more aware of how much involvement I need. So that might help, just, you know, from sharing the process.
Yeah, I really like that, Amanda. All right, well, we are right at time now, so it's been great. I know we didn't have a ton of people here, but I enjoyed the conversation. Is this something that we should continue with? Did you all enjoy it and get something out of it?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I think we should keep it going.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would definitely watch beforehand next time.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you all for joining for the conversation. I will. I think I might have set this up for monthly. I don't know if it was a one-off, but if it was a one-off, I'll get a regular cadence going, and we can start to source some additional content and videos. If you have anything that you really like or would recommend, let me know, because I've got a list of things, but they're all kind of a couple years old. It's been a while since I was actively like curating these things.
Mike, where are you going to store these recordings? I'd like to send it over.
I figured I would upload it to Unfiltered.
Okay, great.
But I can put it on the drive as well if you'd like.
No, Unfiltered is
it's recording locally right now.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.